Now, continuing our chat, looking back on the World Championship, a lot of talk about the Ali Pali crowd over the last 3 weeks. What did you make of the crowd? Did they cross the line at times?
I think they did. And we saw something that I guess we've seen it occasionally, particularly on the Euro Tour, where you would see people cheering just based on nationality or even what country you're representing. But it seemed to go a step further. And on the Euro Tour, to some extent, it makes sense because you only have usually those 4 representatives, maybe a couple more when it's in the Netherlands because some of the players will be seeded or qualified by other means. But you don't see that many. And actually in the Netherlands, it's usually not that bad. There might be cheering, but there's not usually booing. You've seen a little bit in Germany and some other places where there'll be occasional booing, but it's only a few players. And I can understand that when you have 1 or 2 players in the field from your country and the home country, you're cheering it on, especially when it's not at a major event. But half the field is British, and most of those are English. And to be openly booing players who are generally really popular, like Peter Wright, solely because the opponent is English, just doesn't make sense when that is pretty much every match. This is not a competition based on nationality. This is an individual competition where each of them are representing themselves and trying to compete for themselves. And it just goes a step too far when it's every single match. That said, the booing did die out near the end, and that's because when you get to the quarterfinals, semifinals, final stages, the people are attending, at least more of them tend to be darts fans because the more expensive tickets than you will see in the earlier rounds. So it wasn't as bad, although there still was some booing. But some of those earlier round matches where you're seeing players, very often the only representative from a country who isn't even a full-time darts player, who's just there because they qualified, getting booed, just went a step too far, especially when it's solely because of the country or the flag next to their name. That said, it was great to have the crowd back. And most of the fans weren't doing that. They were the most vocal ones because, well, you can hear it when there's 30 people all saying the exact same thing. That tends to be pretty darn loud. And most of the fans weren't doing that. But it's something that needs to be, it needs to be dealt with because this is not a national event. This is a world championship, a world event, and players should not be being booed solely because of the flag next to their name. I thought it went too far. But again, it should not detract from the tournament overall because it was just a few small people who lost the plot.
Yeah, they definitely did. And just starting off really touching on what Matt Porter, the PDC chief executive, said on TalkSport before the final. He was asked about the crowd and he said, you don't want someone to be picked on for where they're from. That's unacceptable. It's been a different dynamic with the crowd. Normally there's a third of tickets that are sold to non-UK fans, but our ticket data shows that only a handful have made the trip from outside the UK this year. He wouldn't say that the atmosphere is here to stay. He reckons it's going to go back to that international, multi-cosmopolitan crowd where you get a different flavour and a bit more balanced atmosphere. And I certainly hope so because, yeah, I think the crowd definitely did overstep the mark at times, and particularly the going price game was some of the chants that were coming out from some of the crowd. I'm not going to say it was all the crowd. I'm not going to tar them all with the same brush, but some of the crowd, some of the songs that they were coming out with, there's just no place for it. It's just not acceptable. And we saw on the Sky broadcast as well, Stuart Pike, Wayne Mardle, Laura Woods, the presenter, they're all condemning the crowd for what they were doing. And it's all well and good saying that on the broadcast, but we can do what we want at home. We can shout and scream at the TV, but for those in the crowd, they're the ones that need to know about it. So for me, I'd love to see something done about it because you want to have the atmosphere, but there needs to be a happy medium, doesn't there? I think they did cross the line, and we're never going to go back to the days of, I was watching some of the darts golds that were running where it was in the Circus Tavern and you had the late Bruce Spendley stopping play to remind the crowd to give the best of order. That's not going to happen, but there needs to be something done to make sure that the players aren't being abused and they're not being called certain things because they're all up there trying to achieve a dream and provide for their families. And if they're getting that level of abuse, I think it's just not on. So yeah, it was a shame to see that side of it come through this year. But as Matt Porter says as well, hopefully we'll see next year more fans from outside the UK, like Germany, the Netherlands, come over, because the times that I've been before as well, you've seen a lot of darts fans from all around the world to come over and make the trip, make that pilgrimage to Ali Pali. So hopefully the crowd will be different next year. Doesn't detract from the fact that we did get the crowd that we did, and hopefully something will be done so that we don't see that again.